Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're about to start. This is an audit committee meeting. It's Tuesday, March 24th. Mr. Clerk, it is 6:31. I'm going to ask, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I see none. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Maracas, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Comments, questions on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk, we have one delegation tonight. It is Giselle Bodkin, a partner, and Andrea Noss, a manager from BDO Canada. And I've asked them to come forward. You have up to 10 minutes.
Okay, hopefully it'll be faster than that. Good evening, everyone. You might wonder why we're here. As part of the standards, public accounting standards, we are to meet with the audit committee twice a year, once before we start the audit, and once at the end to tell you what the findings are. So there is a letter that I think you all have, and it's really just our audit committee letter. So, okay. So, all right, here's the notes. So I'm just going to highlight, purpose of the meeting is just, how do I move it down? Just mouse it? Okay, gotcha. Good. Okay, so these are the table of contents of the letter. And the letter just talks about the engagement team, audit strategy, management responsibilities. And I'm just going to flip to some parts of the letter for you tonight. And that's all we basically have to do for our communication with you. And it can be done, the communication, this letter can be done in person or also via email. So there are some municipalities we don't show up at this meeting. We send all the councillors a letter, we ask them a few questions, and they respond back. So I'm happy to be here today in person. It's good to meet some people. It gives you the opportunity, if you wanted to do something in camera without us here or without your staff here, you can do whatever you want if somebody has something on their mind. I've also had situations where councillors have emailed me personally about some issue after a meeting, and you're welcome to do that. So if you just go to your letter, so the first part of the letter just says that this is really the terms of our engagement of what we do on an audit, and it talks about our responsibilities, that we're going to be issuing an unqualified report, and it tells us what our engagement objectives are. So we are doing an audit that is in accordance with PSAB, which is Public Accounting Standards. So the next page just talks about, if anybody is interested, they can read our audit strategy, and there's an appendix to go over what we do as auditors. And you can read that and ask questions at any time. The other item I'm supposed to communicate to you is materiality. So if you can see, the materiality for this audit is 1.45 million. And the performance materiality is $1,087,000. Why I'm communicating that with you is if there's an error under 1.4 million, which to you and I would seem like a huge error, but that's the way the audit is done based on your budget. So we are not looking for a $50,000 error or a $10,000 error. Okay, that's the CICA standards. Because we say that the town, it wouldn't be material if there was $1 million error. For you and I in our bank accounts, that would be material. For the town, it wouldn't be material. So just for anybody who hasn't been doing audit, now you might say, well, I want the materiality lowered. Well, that's not our accounting standards, and that's not the way the audit is based across, Canada. And I can't explain that to you in a day, but it's just the way the accounting standards go. There are certain people who come in and do specific audits. I want you to audit somebody's expense account for 10 cents. So that would be a specific audit. There would be a fee quote to audit that particular account. So, anyways, having said that, the audit relies a lot on controls, people signing off, 3 people looking at something before it's approved, budgets that council sets. So, but a lot of people who don't know a lot about audits get very upset with, what do you mean the materiality is 1.5 million? But that's what it is. If you go to the school board in Toronto, like some of the materiality is 22 million. I don't know what the materiality is on the City of Toronto. The City of Barrie was 5 million. So it's based on the size of your audit. So then just some risk. I'm just going to turn it over to Andrea. Just talk about a couple more things so you don't have to listen to me. Andrea, do you want to talk about that?
Okay, so we just in our letter we discussed some just general risks that are really for basically every audit that we have. These are very standard risks that we have to address in our audit. First one being management override of controls, which just means that management is in a position technically to override specific controls and numbers, and we have to use our professional skepticism and judgment to address that risk. And then we'll move on to fraud risk, which again exists in every organization. And what we do as auditors is we look at the process that you guys have in regards to oversight, both at the management level and at the audit committee level, to address the potential for fraud. And we do a lot of documentation in that area, and of course we ask you, the committee, as well, if there's anything that we should be aware of in regards to fraud.
The last thing we communicate in our letter is our audit fees, the timing of the audit. We communicate that we're independent. I'm not related to any of the councillors. Dan and I are not related. Or Jason. And as part of our audit, we will give you a management rep letter. And we also have highlighted any new accounting standards. One of the biggest accounting standards that's coming down is for contaminated sites. They have to be accrued now in financial statements that the management is aware of, the treasurer is aware of, and we're working on that. So basically, part of the reason to be here is to ask you if you are worried about any part of the audit, if you've noticed any fraud that's happened in the municipality over the year that you need us to look into. And if you're not aware of any events, then you just say everything's fine, and you can email me if you don't want to talk out right now, and that's really why we're here. So it's a pretty straightforward job.
Thank you very much. Could I have a motion to receive? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Maracas. Are there any questions or comments to the delegate? Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. So when you do your audit, do you strictly look at the current year's audit, or do you compare it to previous years?
We're auditing just the first year, but as part of the audit, we compare to budget, we compare to prior years, sometimes 2 or 3 years, looking for trends. But our opinion is on the current year. Yeah. And just one thing to highlight is that we had a prior period adjustment last year. I don't know if everybody knows what a prior period adjustment is, but it really had to do with, it's when we go back and say something was missed last year, and we have to communicate to everybody a prior period adjustment. And what the prior period adjustment was last year had to do with the capital assets. And I will tell you that almost every municipality is having prior period adjustments on the capital assets, because staff went through, all the lands and roads, and it was a huge thing to come up with whatever your capital assets are, $100 million. And what happens is, a few years later, they say, oh, we over-depreciated this, or there's some more costs that we didn't consider. So it's a bit of a work in progress. We will probably have another prior period adjustment on the capital assets this year. For most municipalities, it's 2 to 3 years before they kind of get it right under PSAB standards. It doesn't affect your budget, but it's more on the financial statements. Somebody had a great idea to take all the assets out there and put them on the municipality's books.
That was the province.
Yes. And it cost the municipalities a lot of money. The auditors were happy. We made more money because we had to audit the numbers, but yeah. But you had to hire people just to do this, and the purpose is that they want you doing capital asset management plans. I mean, I guess down the road it'll be a good thing. So before you used to just expense your roads, expense your buildings, expense whatever you bought. Now you have to capitalize it and depreciate it. So I think that way the province can figure out who needs the money, and they want to make sure that every municipality is keeping their infrastructure up. So I guess that's why they started with this.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Welcome back, Ms. Stockton.
Thank you.
Just regarding the change going forward with regards to the obligations for contaminated sites, I wonder if you can sort of expand upon it. You mentioned that we're now required to identify what could be the potential, I guess, cleanup costs, or what that liability is. But is it strictly just related to that environmental aspect, the cleanup costs, or does it go beyond that? I don't know if you can sort of talk to that new requirement.
You want me to do it? Okay, so basically, it's the cleanup for the, it has to be a site that's in use. If it's a site that's not in use, you don't have to worry about it. So, and there's a criteria. So you have to get an inventory of all of these, it's out of use. Out of use, sorry. It has to be out of use. So if you have a contaminated site that you're still operating, isn't that funny? You don't have to accrue for the liability. So it's all this land that you're just sitting on that you think might be contaminated. You have to figure out how much it would cost to put it to the provincial standard that you're required to do, and extrapolate that back and accrue it on your financial statements.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation. I think my curiosity really is based on the fact that the town acquired the armory in town, and it was listed on the federal site. And so, but now we're kind of using it. So I'd be interested to see how that gets accounted for or accrued in terms of liability or not as we move forward in this process.
That property, because it's in use, it's in a municipal use, it's out of scope for the review.
Yep. Makes no sense.
Any other councillors? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you for coming. My first question is about the fact that you're here. Would it be more cost-effective for the town not to have a presentation, but to have, as you mentioned, an email communication? Or maybe that's a question to Mr. Elliott.
The audit price is fixed, okay. So it's not costing any more to have me here. I think it's a good thing to come to these meetings, especially for the smaller municipalities. And I think when you have an election where there's new councillors, it's also a good idea to come.
Thank you, I agree. On page 4 of, it's your letter dated March 4th, the second paragraph down, it says, "This report has been prepared solely for the use of the audit committee and should not be distributed without our prior consent." Now, this is on an agenda, a public agenda?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. I think it's just a standard thing we put in every letter. But we know that this is on a public agenda, and so we know where it's going to be given to people. I think if it was a private company, we would want to know that you're telling everybody what the materiality is, you're telling a bank or something like that. We know that this is a public company, so we know that it's going to be posted and it's going to be in an agenda. That's an excellent question.
And the last question is, as counselors, as a council, to say that, or just to say that we're not aware of any fraud, it really doesn't seem to me to be appropriate. How would we be aware of any fraud? Or Mr. CAO, is there a policy whereby council would be informed of any fraud that then we would be able to speak to you about?
We've had situations where someone has approached a counselor and said something to them. So it's your duty to tell me that, one of the town staff has mentioned something to you, or somebody was at a hockey arena and noticed something. I mean, you're out there talking to your constituents. So does it happen often? No, but it has happened once, and Andrew and I were involved, and it happened, it was actually a staff member that told us, and then told the council, and then we had to do some extra work.
And is it our obligation as a council or as a councillor to first tell the mayor or the CAO, or are we meant to communicate with you directly?
I don't know what your duty is. I only know that my duty is to ask you once a year, have you heard about any fraud at the municipalities? And you're to say, no, nobody said anything to me. I think your CAO and your staff set policies to prevent fraud, and they set the controls for the municipality, and we audit those controls and tell you where there's weaknesses. So...
Sure.
Yes, I would like to know what my responsibility would be. Thank you.
So, Mr. Garvey, through you, Mr. Chair, for the purpose of audit, your obligation is to report anything directly to the auditors. As a matter of practice, you need to use your best discretion in terms of who it affects, and then inform the head of council and myself for follow-up. And we would involve whatever investigative level is necessary, whether it's just an internal scrutiny or whether it requires police investigation as well.
Thank you. Just to be clear, do we have a dual duty to report it here to the head of council and yourself and to the auditor, or do you then report it to the auditor?
Mr. Garvey, through you, Mr. Chair, if you are asked directly by the auditors, then you need to respond to them directly.
Thank you, and we certainly hope that nobody will be in that situation.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Questions? Seeing none? Mr. Elliott, would you like to comment?
If I could just assist with this very issue, is the issue that the auditors are interested in is, are you aware of any fraud or suspected fraud? And that's not to include things like, I saw these guys standing around and that was a waste of money, obviously. But we're talking about illegal activity and misappropriation, deliberate misappropriation of funding. During the year, when that comment arises to you, that would be a report to the CAO and the mayor at your discretion. When the auditor arrives, they're preparing for the audit. That's when they're asking you this question, and that's when you would advise. But also, they're asking us the same questions. And so they're hitting all the bases. And so they're coming today to ask you that question. Are you aware of any known or suspected fraud? And I'll project Giselle's email at the end of the session here for you to jot down if you wish to communicate by email.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. All right, I'll call a vote to receive the delegate. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Bogdan.
I'll see you
Ms. Nass.
in the summer or the spring or June.
Very good. There's the information, council, if anyone wants to jot that down. We'll now go to consideration of the item. So, Mr. Clerk, we will put this item, a motion to endorse. Could I have someone make a motion for this? Councillor Tom, seconded by Councillor Kim. Mr. Elliott, the word endorse is here. Would you care to open up and get us started on this?
Certainly, we had quite a bit of discussion with this, with the clerk and other staff. The word endorsed is used in this resolution because, in my opinion, the auditors have a duty to audit committee to conduct their audit, but they also have an obligation to you to pursue anything that arises during the audit down the rabbit hole and as far as they need to come to the conclusion that they need to come to. And so, if you approve the audit plan, it perhaps could be conceived as cuffing them in some way or constraining them. And so I believe that it's more appropriate to endorse the plan, allow them to run their course at their discretion, and report back to you in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Are there any comments or questions? At this time, I see none. I will call for a vote then. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Mr. Clerk, we have no consideration, well, we did consideration of items, excuse me, closed session, there is none. So I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Marakis, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are now adjourned. Thank you.
I'm not sure.
Thanks, Dan. Unless it would be an agenda.
Except your pocket.
No, it's good. Good. The Ontario Public Libraries Act governs libraries, and you're strictly in charge of fees and bonds. Libraries are do something, yeah, for sure. But in terms of metrics, most libraries, right? You look at municipal studies and stuff, it's about somewhere around $60 a resident, right? So we're a little bit higher, but most people say Aurora, great library, probably provide more than most libraries. Part of the consciousness.
So Michael,